This is Kat Klingensmith with Retro Crime. We have all gone through hardships and sometimes felt that no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't do anything right. But I doubt any of us had as much proof as Alfred Hart. There's an old belief that swans sing most beautifully right before they die, hence the term swan song. If there were an opposite of that, that would be Alfred Hart. His final performance in life was failing at everything he did in the most spectacular ways. Alfred was born in the 1840s and lived in Oregon Hill, Pennsylvania, which is in the middle of the state. I can't even name a recognizable city that it's near. It's an hour away from Cherry Springs State Park, which is a dark sky preserve. That's how remote it is. It's in an area that in modern times still doesn't have light pollution. A side note, we went there for our anniversary a couple of years ago, and if you've never been to a dark sky preserve, I highly suggest it. It's amazing. It was nearly a 4-hour drive and goes through the extremely remote Pennsylvania wilds. Twice on that drive, I've seen a fisher, and my husband thinks that I've made that entire creature up. Like I told him I spotted some cryptid. But it's real. It's a fisher. I didn't know what it was, though, the first time I saw one, and I didn't see all of it. I only saw its little hairy butt slinking away. So I had to Google brown hairy animal butts of Pennsylvania, and adding the word animal in that search is very important, trust me. And I Googled until I found the hairy little butt, and it was on a creature I had never heard of, but it does indeed exist, and it is native to the wilds. If I'm going to spot a mythical creature, it will likely be on our next anniversary trip. We're going to visit the Mothman in West Virginia. In the meantime, I'm looking for a crime there that's interesting enough for an episode. So, the Pennsylvania wilds have dark skies, fisher, it has porcupines, it has its own mythical creature actually, called a squonk, and in the late 19th century, it also had a man named Alfred Hart. While still a young man, he was drafted into the Union Army. Before fighting in the war, he had been a decent person from a well-respected family. He returned a bit of a rascal, getting into trouble often, usually from fighting or from debt. He was a blacksmith and he wasn't able to produce more than he spent. His land was confiscated and sold to pay off his debts. Alfred married twice, both of his wives died young, and he only had one child, a daughter named Mary. His second wife was also a bit of a rascal. She was also getting into fights. They sound like drinkers, because how many sober people get into saloon fights? At 49 years old, Alfred took a local farmer who was fantastically named Mortimer Rood. Not enough Mortimers these days. He took Mortimer to court and said that Mortimer owed him 25 cents. Even in 1889, 25 cents wasn't worth much. A quarter back then is still worth less than $10 today. Alfred lost the case and was stuck paying the court costs, which totaled far more than 25 cents. Soon afterwards, 2 of Mortimer's cows died suspiciously. No one knew how the cows died, but it was speculated that they were killed by Parisian green, which was a powerful insecticide made with the Victorian era's favorite ingredient, arsenic. The main suspect was his abashed enemy, Alfred Hart, and Alfred was promptly arrested. Alfred posted bail, and he could have just left, and I doubt he would even need a lawyer for this case because there wasn't any evidence, there wasn't a confession, and there were no witnesses. But that would have been sensible, and that's just not how Alfred Hart worked. He moved into a boarding house across the street from a store owned by a man named Joseph Graham. He bided his time. During the town picnic, Mortimer Rood stopped by the store. After getting into his carriage about to leave, Alfred appeared with a revolver. He had been waiting and watching. He crossed the street and exclaimed, "Your life is mine!" and pulled the trigger. Click. Tried again. Click. Joseph Graham ran over to help Mortimer, and Alfred pointed the gun at Joseph. Click. Tried again. Click. The store owner successfully wrestled the gun from Alfred. When I told my husband this story, I couldn't remember what Alfred had said to Mortimer. I just knew that it was some badass line meant to be his final words before vanquishing his enemy. I told Jason it was something like, "I'll see you in hell," or "Your day has come," or something that would have been awesome if he had actually shot him. Jason guessed, and his guess was a quote from Pete Weber, the bowler, which is, "Who do you think you are? I am." And I died because if you haven't seen it, Google Pete Weber bowler and you will find a glorious 44-second clip of him delivering this iconic line. It's one of my happy places on the internet. After Alfred Hart was overpowered and humiliated, he ran back to the boarding house and to his room on the top floor. He took out his jackknife and tried to slit his own throat, but his blade was dull. He worked away at it, and since it was taking so long, he gave up and jumped out the window. He didn't jump far enough and landed on the patio deck 10 feet below. Since he still had his knife in his hand, he went back to unplanned A and resumed trying to cut his throat with what was now rendered barely more than a butter knife. He was found and brought back up to his room. The nearest doctor was summoned, which, because of the remoteness of their location, meant a 24-hour wait. It was a waste of a trip, because there was nothing the doctor could do. Instead of slitting his throat and bleeding out, Alfred's perseverance had been aimed at the wrong spot. He had severed his windpipe and esophagus. Eventually, he died of starvation, so he did successfully kill himself, gradually. On his deathbed, he wrote a confession that wasn't to be opened until after he died. Papers all over the country falsely reported his confession early because they wanted to believe the tantalizing rumors about it. The gossip was that Alfred confessed to not only poisoning Mortimer Rood's cows, but that he also poisoned his wife and killed the peddler whose remains were found under some bushes. The media had the decency to retract this when the real confession was opened and printed. Alfred's deathbed confession wasn't something a detective or a priest would find especially useful. He confessed that he was innocent. It said, I'm quoting, "I am not guilty of poisoning Rood's cows. I have done a good many things that I ought not to have done, but nothing so bad as that." Let me stop the hungry fellow here. He tried to kill 2 people, one of whom was an innocent storekeeper. At the time of his death, Alfred's daughter Mary had already married years ago and had moved 400 miles away to West Virginia. She married at 15, and West Virginia was the place to go for child brides because the state didn't require proof of age. Mary's caretaker couldn't even take care of himself, and there were services for orphans, but Mary technically wasn't one. So unfortunately, marriage was a good way for her to get her basic needs met. This pathetic story of Alfred Hart is comical, but there are tears in this clown. I don't think Alfred was a victim of bad luck. I think he had what they called soldier's disease. He came back from the war a different man. This Civil War was different. Weapons had advanced faster than the style of warfare. Also, to humankind's discredit, it's easier to devalue people who look different. This was a war where brothers fought on opposite sides. The enemy spoke the same language. They understood each other's last words. They killed fellow young men with wedding bands on. There's no denying that these were people. That's hard to live with, no matter the cause. It can break people. Back then, there weren't atypical antipsychotics or therapists teaching DBT skills. Traumatized people relied on the standard home remedies like alcoholism and morphine addiction. It seems like Alfred's mind was stuck somewhere else, making him careless and forgetful. I think his gun misfired simply because it was dirty. It was owned by a blacksmith. The black part is iron oxide. It's called fire scale. It's from heating metal, and it gets everywhere. If it got in a seldomly used gun, it could damage the metal. The dull knife is just laziness. How many of us sharpen our knives regularly? I can barely cut tomatoes with my kitchen knives. A dirty gun and dull knife means that Alfred wasn't using his weapons or thinking about using them. He wasn't a tough guy. The fights he was in, they were usually assaults against him. Fragile people are easy targets for bullies. Each time Alfred summoned the courage to stand up for himself, he wasn't tough enough, and it turned against him. Mortimer Rood probably did owe him 25 cents. I think Mortimer tried out Parisian Green, a new product on the market that finally arrived in their remote area, and it worked fabulously as a pesticide and fungicide. So much so that it took out the cows he was inadvertently letting graze on it. Alfred didn't need Parisian Green. Even if he had a rat problem, There were more affordable things at the store for a man in debt. It's no wonder he was suicidal. He lost wives, he lost fights, he lost his court case, he lost money, he lost his daughter, he lost his dignity. And when all he had to keep him going was revenge, he lost that too. There is nothing left but a lonely man with bad memories. In his last weeks, I hope he gains the ability to laugh at the absurdity, because making light of our hardships takes away their darkness that keeps us from living.